Hey guys, tonight we slip into the soft, half-lit hush of a world where you wake before the sun, a thin chill on your arms and the rest of the house still breathing in its sleep. You pad across creaking floorboards, that tiny lantern throwing a warm circle around your feet, and you start the first quiet duties of a day you'll shoulder entirely alone. It's the kind of morning where the sky's a faded bruise of blue, and you already know that by noon you'll be juggling tasks meant for 2 people, maybe 3. And yes, you probably won't survive this if you keep trying to drink yesterday's leftover tea as if that counts as breakfast. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. While you settle in, tell me your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing how far this sleepy little community stretches. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You tug the door open and step into the early morning stillness, where the air tastes like dew and cold stone. Your first task is simple, almost meditative. Check that the hearth embers survived the night. If they didn't, you're stuck doing that awkward dance of striking flint until your fingers smell like sparks and failure. As you crouch, the orange glow warms your face, and you feel the familiar steadiness of routine settling in, like an old blanket draped across your shoulders. Women through history mastered these early hours with practiced efficiency. In many pre-industrial households, rising before dawn wasn't a lifestyle choice, it was survival budgeting. The quicker you start, the longer the day stretches, like taffy pulled just thin enough to not snap. One mainstream historical fact historians often mention: in many medieval and early modern villages, women were responsible for up to 80% of the home's daily labour, when men were away for months on trade routes, military conscription, herding migrations, or seasonal work. You're living that math right now, stretching yourself across tasks until you're basically a one-person economy. As you move through the kitchen, you can almost feel the ghosts of tasks tugging at your sleeves. The water jug needs refilling, the grain needs sifting, the last batch of bread dough, left rising overnight beneath a cloth, needs punching down before it decides to escape the bowl with the confidence of a rebellious teenager. And somewhere outside, a rooster screams like it's auditioning for a horror movie, which honestly feels like a personal attack. The quirky truth is, in some ancient households, especially in Roman rural settings, women sometimes buried small good luck charms under the kitchen threshold, tiny figurines, shells, or bits of coloured glass, to ensure a smooth morning routine. You glance down at your own doorway, half tempted to slip a pebble under it just, in case. Because let's be honest, anything that can ward off the spirit of burned porridge is worth considering. You move next to opening shutters, letting in the faint blush of dawn. Dust motes swirl lazily in the beams of light, drifting the way your thoughts sometimes do. Historians still argue whether women preferred tackling chores alone in this quiet hour, or whether the isolation weighed heavily on them. Some diaries and letters hint at solitude being a rare pocket of peace. Others describe this exact moment as the loneliest stretch of the day. You stand there, hand on the window frame, deciding which version feels truer to you. The house creaks as it wakes, the wooden beams complaining like elderly relatives. You check the corridor, mentally noting which rooms need sweeping. Floors didn't clean themselves back then. Tragic, really. Even more tragic, you can't even bribe a robot vacuum because it's a few centuries away from existing, and you're still fighting with a broom that sheds more than your neighbour's cat. You step outside next, because part of the morning rhythm involves the quick perimeter check, a phrase that makes you sound like a medieval security guard. But truly you're looking for practical signs. Did the wind knock over the drying rack? Did the goats chew through something again? Did the neighbour's kids sneak in and steal berries? Spoiler, yes, always yes. Your breath clouds in the cold, drifting upward as birds start their tentative chirps. As you walk the path toward the small storage shed, you let your fingers trail along the rough wall. The texture grounds you, reminding you that your world is made of things you maintain with your own hands. Women across centuries kept households running like miniature kingdoms. You're the steward, the planner, the overseer of everything, from where the potatoes sleep to when the herbs need grinding. Your mind flickers to something your grandmother might have said. Some tiny proverb that once annoyed you, but now rings true with embarrassing accuracy. Something like, "The day is shorter when you wait for help." You smirk to yourself. She wasn't wrong. Returning indoors, you set the kettle near the rekindled fire. The rhythmic crackle is soothing, almost hypnotic. In this drowsy early hour before responsibilities start yelling at you in full stereo, you have a moment to simply breathe. Maybe sip a little something warm, maybe enjoy the silence before children or animals decide you've rested too much. And yet, despite the calm, there's a tiny ache under your ribs. You imagine him, the man who should be here, halfway across the mountains or on some creaking ship or trudging through a field miles away. You wonder what his morning looks like. Does he think of home as he wakes? Historians still debate whether long absences strengthened bonds or thinned them like watered stew. You hope yours is the stronger sort. Your kettle whistles. The day begins, in earnest. You gather your thoughts, square your shoulders, and step fully into the tasks ahead. Because even though you're tired and maybe a little lonely, you know this. You're the heartbeat of this household, and everything moves because you move. You ease into the pantry with that slow, purposeful walk of someone who knows the day's decisions begin here, in the dim coolness between stacked jars and woven baskets. The air smells like dried thyme, old wood, and a faint whisper of last summer's apples. You pause, lantern lifted, surveying the shelves like a commander reviewing troops before sending them into battle. And honestly, these jars might be braver than half the men who claim they can't survive without you. Your first real task is rationing the food stores, stretching supplies across weeks or months without accidentally inventing starvation as a personality trait. You touch each container with a quiet calculation. Beans? Enough for, maybe, 10 days if you're generous. Grain? Doesn't look bad, but that sack is definitely slumping to one side like it drank too much last night. Onions? The good ones are getting wrinkly. The bad ones are auditioning for a tragic role in a romance novel. A mainstream historical fact you know too well. In many early households, from medieval Europe to classical India, women were entirely responsible for managing long-term food stores, often preparing months in advance for seasons when their husbands were away on military campaigns or trade journeys. Food shortages weren't just inconvenient, they were existential. So here you are, doing mental math before breakfast. You deserve a medal, or a nap. You kneel to check the smoked meats hanging near the rafters. They sway slightly as you touch them, brushing your knuckles with the cool firmness of something preserved through patience and a lot of salt. Salt that, by the way, was so valuable in some regions that it was literally used as currency. Historians still argue whether the phrase "worth your salt" came from wages or from the cost of preserving food. You don't care which is right. You just know you're guarding your salt like a dragon guarding treasure. Then you spot it. The jar you hoped you had more of. Honey, the good honey. The honey you told the kids absolutely do not touch under any circumstances, even if you see the gods themselves reaching for it. You lift the jar. It's half full, which is better than empty, but still disappointing enough to make you exhale loudly at the ceiling, as if the ceiling is responsible. There's a quirky tidbit you remember. Ancient Egyptians believed honey never spoiled, so they buried jars of it in tombs alongside the dead. Archaeologists have found honey thousands of years old still technically edible. You shake your jar thoughtfully. You would personally fight a mummy for just one more jar of this stuff. You set it gently back in place and move on. Next comes the dried fruit basket. Raisins, figs, maybe some slices of apple shriveled like old gossip. Useful, but not particularly exciting. You pop one into your mouth, chewing slowly, letting the sweetness remind you that life is still good, even if the pantry is trying to gaslight you into thinking otherwise. Your fingers trail along a row of clay pots filled with lentils. You like lentils. They're reliable, filling, and they don't complain. Unlike goats, or merchants, or neighbours with opinions, you check the lids for cracks because rodents are basically historical villains who appear in every era. You tap the sides of each pot, listening for that hollow, reassuring thud. Full enough, safe enough, for now. You decide to reorganize things. A disaster, yes, but a necessary one. You pull jars forward, push sacks back, stack herbs in neat rows because it helps your brain feel less like a scrambled egg. Meanwhile, outside the window, the sun is stretching across the sky like it's late for an appointment. You ignore it. The pantry is its own universe. Another stray thought sneaks in, because your brain loves interrupting itself. Did I remember to soak the beans? You squint, thinking, probably, maybe, definitely, possibly. You shake your head. That counts as certainty. As you inventory the shelves, You start forming your rationing plan. Women in many historical societies used a clever system of sliding portions, slightly smaller meals on days when work was lighter, regular meals during harvesting or intense labour, and feast-level meals only for festivals or emergencies where morale needed boosting. You adopt the same strategy, dividing your stores in your mind like slices of an invisible pie. Pie that you wish you had. Pie that you absolutely deserve. Halfway through assessing the grain, you hear a scuttling noise. You freeze. Please don't be a mouse. Please don't be a mouse. You slowly turn your head. It's a mouse. Of course it is. You sigh, deeply, dramatically, like someone in a historical romance whose beloved has betrayed them by eating the last biscuit. You clap your hand sharply, sending the creature fleeing into whatever tiny mouse dimension it came from. You remind yourself to set traps later, or maybe adopt a cat. A big, judgmental cat who takes its responsibilities seriously. You finish taking stock and step back, rubbing your arms. The shelves look smaller now that you've confronted reality. But here's the thing. You've done this before. You know how to stretch ingredients like an alchemist turning dust into dinner. You've soaked stale bread in broth to make it soft again. You've turned leftover vegetables into stew, so good even picky children stop complaining for 5 minutes straight. Miracles, really. Historians still debate whether women under rationing pressure experienced empowerment or chronic anxiety. The truth is probably both. You hold the power of the household's survival in your hands, but that power weighs something. It presses gently against your ribs, reminding you that every spoonful matters. You close the pantry door slowly, lantern lowering with the motion. The supplies aren't abundant, but they're workable. You'll stretch them with creativity, with determination, and with a little bit of that stubborn magic women have always used to keep families alive through scarcity. You exhale softly. Another day. Another set of choices. Another quiet victory waiting to unfold in the kitchen. You slide the pantry door shut with that gentle push that tells the wood, "Please behave today," and turn toward the small table where you keep your household accounts. It's an unimpressive setup. Just a flat surface, a few ink-stained scraps of parchment or paper, a quill that has seen things, and a little jar of ink that dries out faster than your patience. But this is the command center of your entire world. If the pantry was the heart, the ledger is the brain. A slightly messy brain. A brain that sometimes forgets what 2 + 2 is when you're tired. You sit down, exhale, and straighten the pile of crinkled notes that definitely weren't left in a crinkled pile by you. No, of course not. This is totally organized chaos. It's fine. You're fine. Everything is fine. Your first task, track what came in last week versus what needs to go out. Even when men were home, household accounting often fell to women. A mainstream historical fact. In many medieval and early modern European households, women handled small-scale bookkeeping because they were the ones in charge of purchasing, storing, and distributing daily goods. They kept tally sticks, wrote housebooks, and even monitored debts owed by neighbours. It's one of those historical realities people conveniently forget when they claim women weren't involved in finances. If only those people had to balance a budget while 4 children screamed about bread crusts. You pick up one of your notes. It's a scribble you made 2 days ago, probably written while you were tired and listing ingredients like the world was ending. It says something like, 2 sacks barley, pay mid-month, no more credit. You nod to yourself, as if your past self is a wise sage warning you from beyond the grave. No more credit. You mean it this time. Probably. You dip your quill into the ink and begin copying the numbers into your main ledger. The scratching sound is both soothing and mildly irritating, like a cat simultaneously purring and knocking things off shelves. But rhythm helps you think. You jot down what you owe the miller, what you owe the travelling peddler for that spool of thread, and what your neighbour owes you for borrowing 2 jars of oil and returning exactly 0 jars because she forgot. You tap the quill against your chin. Should you ask her about it again? Historians still argue whether women preferred direct confrontation or passive-aggressive hinting when it came to debts. Evidence suggests both methods flourished beautifully. You decide to give it another day, or week, or century. You turn to the incoming page, one of your favourites, mostly because it's shorter and feels less overwhelming. There's income from selling butter, a small payment from mending a cloak, a few coins someone gave you after you helped deliver a baby last month. You smile at that one. It's strange how little moments of community support stitch themselves into your accounting like soft threads. Then you uncover a folded slip of paper with mysterious writing on it. You squint. Did you write this? Maybe. It says, check chicken yard fence before next rain. You place it in the urgentish pile, which is really a polite way of saying things you'll do when you suddenly remember them at midnight. Another quirky tidbit floats into your mind. Some Renaissance women kept expense poems, literal rhyming verses reminding them of purchases, like a personal musical to-do list. You imagine yourself singing about barley and soap like you're starring in a very unhinged Broadway performance. Tempting. As you flip through the ledger pages, you notice stains here and there, oil spots, crumbs, smudges. Your accounts are not pristine, but they are lived in, honest, practical, which basically sums you up too. You chuckle softly at that thought, half embarrassed and half proud. You pause to calculate how long your current coin stash will last. You arrange the coins on the table, lining them up with the precision of someone pretending these tiny discs determine her destiny, which they kind of do. You press one between your fingers, cold, solid, a tiny anchor in the swirling sea of responsibility. A gust of wind rattles the shutters. You look up, half expecting a tax collector to burst in dramatically like a villain in a children's tale. Because yes, tax collectors appear in every historical era like a cosmic joke. You shudder at the thought, which reminds you, you still need to set aside money for next month's dues. Wonderful. Just wonderful. You pull out the small cloth pouch labelled Household Reserve. It's tied with a knot so complicated you're not sure whether you invented it or someone cursed it. You untie it carefully. Inside is your emergency fund, tiny, precious, and definitely not large enough for an actual emergency, but big enough to make you feel slightly less doomed. Historians still debate whether women were intentionally left out of long-distance financial decisions, or whether they handled more than surviving records show. You suspect the latter. After all, you're doing all of this, balancing books, negotiating with merchants, deciding how much grain to grind each week, with no official recognition beyond occasionally being called resourceful. Honestly, you deserve to be called Supreme Commander of Domestic Stability. It has a nice ring to it. You update the last few rows in your ledger, stretching your fingers when your hand starts cramping from writing. You hear children outside, or maybe just birds pretending to be children. It's hard to tell before you've had proper food. Your stomach growls, reminding you that rationing supplies is noble, but feeding yourself is also important. You scribble one last note about the next market day and close the ledger with a soft thud. You look around the kitchen, feeling a rare moment of satisfaction. The accounts, not perfect, but under control. The supplies, not abundant, but workable. You're holding everything together with ink, grit, and a level of willpower that deserves at least 3 desserts. You gather your papers into a tidy pile, secure them with a worn ribbon, and rise slowly from the table. Another task completed. Another small victory claimed quietly, without applause, without fanfare. You smooth your apron, stretch your back, and head toward the doorway. You have a household to run. The world outside your door is waiting. You step out into the courtyard with that cautious optimism of someone who hopes today's labourers will behave, but also fully expects at least one of them to invent a new kind of chaos. Managing hired workers is its own art. Part diplomacy, part threat display, part emotional endurance test. You squint toward the tool shed, already hearing the faint murmur of voices drifting in the morning air. Yep, they're here, and they're talking. Which means the day is already more complicated than you'd like. You wipe your hands on your apron and head toward them with the measured pace of someone who's learned that walking too quickly can make workers think you're desperate, but walking too slowly makes them think you don't care. It's a balance. Everything is a balance. A mainstream historical fact. In many agrarian societies, medieval Europe, ancient China, the Ottoman countryside, women regularly supervised hired or seasonal labourers when men were away. They negotiated wages, assigned tasks, inspected finished work, and occasionally had to remind workers that, yes, I am in charge, and no, you cannot nap behind the shed because the sun is too warm. You get the sense you'll need that exact reminder today. The first worker you see is old Thomas, who has a beard that looks like it lost a battle with a broom. He nods respectfully. Reliable, steady, slightly deaf, but solid. The second worker is Leo, young, cheerful, and absolutely useless before noon. He waves enthusiastically with the energy of someone who definitely did not finish the job you told him to finish yesterday. You greet them with a calm morning, the kind that contains exactly zero tolerance for nonsense. Tomas nods again. Leo smiles a little too broadly. It's fine. You've handled worse. You walk around the farm plots with them trailing behind you like mismatched ducks. The soil is dry in some places, damp in others. You kneel to test it between your fingers, feeling the soft crumble. It needs turning. That's today's first task. You assign Thomas to it because he won't complain, and even if he does, you won't hear it clearly. Leo, meanwhile, gets fence duty. You point toward the sagging section near the chicken yard. That, you say, in a tone that brooks no argument. He nods quickly, perhaps remembering how the chickens escaped last time, and how you had to chase them around the yard looking like a very annoyed windstorm. While they disperse, you stand still for a moment, listening to the quiet rhythm of morning work beginning. It's soothing on some level, the scrape of tools, the soft crunch of footsteps, the faint hum of human energy being directed towards something useful. But you also know that supervising workers isn't just assigning tasks, it's constant vigilance. Workers left unsupervised are like toddlers with axes. They will wander, they will get distracted, they will start hammering the wrong thing. You circle back to check Thomas first. He's already turning the soil with steady determination, pausing every few minutes to wipe his forehead. You nod approvingly. No issues here. Then you check on Leo. Oh dear. He has repaired exactly one plank. One. And the rest of the fence is staring at you with judgment. You step up behind him, clearing your throat. He startles like you're a ghost. Working on it, he insists, voice cracking. You arch an eyebrow so sharply it could split firewood. He straightens immediately and resumes hammering with theatrical urgency. There's a quirky tidbit that comes to mind. In some rural communities, women supervising workers would clap loudly or ring a small bell whenever someone slacked off, kind of like an early productivity app. You consider instituting that here. A bell might improve morale or drive everyone insane. Hard to say. As midday approaches, you gather the workers for a simple meal. Bread, cheese, and whatever fruit you managed to rescue from yesterday's pantry crisis. Feeding workers is part of the job. It keeps them loyal, and it keeps them from fainting dramatically in the field and making you feel responsible. They sit in the shade while you portion out the food. You're careful but fair. Never too stingy, never too generous. Historians still argue whether women in charge were tougher or more lenient than men. Evidence suggests something more nuanced. Women were strategic. You give enough to maintain goodwill, but not enough that workers start thinking this is a charity. As they eat, you stand nearby, arms crossed lightly, not in hostility but in authority. You're the center of gravity here. Without you, tasks drift like leaves in a breeze. With you, everything clicks into place, eventually at least. After lunch, you assign new duties. Tomas gets the orchard path. Leo gets reminded, firmly, to finish the fence before sunset or risk your lecture voice, which has been known to cause temporary soul detachment. You take a walk around the property while they work again, checking for damage from last night's wind. A few branches scattered here and there, a bucket knocked over, a broom that looks like it tried to run away. You right the broom, patting it softly. Nice try, you whisper. Around mid-afternoon, you hear a loud clang. Definitely Leo. You resist the urge to pinch the bridge of your nose. You approach and find him sheepish, holding a bent nail and looking like a small child caught eating honey straight from the jar. You calmly show him how to angle the nail properly. He nods with grave seriousness, like you've just shared ancient wisdom. In reality, you have. The wisdom of getting things done with limited hands, limited time, and limited patience. Women like you have passed these survival tricks down through generations. How to manage people who don't listen, how to guide them without yelling, how to keep dignity intact while everything around you threatens to fall apart. By late afternoon, the sun slants low, painting the yard in gold. The fence looks decent, the soil is turned, and the property feels steadier, more capable. You dismiss the workers with a nod and a reminder of tomorrow's tasks. They leave tired but respectful. You stand alone again in the quiet that follows. This moment right here, is the reward. The breath between responsibilities, the stillness after the storm of supervision. You step back inside, savouring the sense that the household moved today because you made it move. You head toward the small barn with the resigned determination of someone who knows, deep down in the tired chambers of the heart, that livestock do not care about your schedule, your feelings, or your hopes for a peaceful afternoon. Livestock operate on pure chaos, instinct, and spite. Animals don't lie awake thinking, "Wow, she really needs a break today." No. They wake up thinking, "Let's test her patience and maybe chew through something expensive." You push the door open, and the familiar scent hits you. Straw, dust, and that distinct animal musk that clings to your clothes like a passive-aggressive reminder of your responsibilities. The chickens cluck indignantly from their corner as if you're late, even though you're not. Chickens are just born judgmental. The goats glare too, standing in that weirdly confident stance goats always have, as though they rule this entire property and you are merely their humble intern. A mainstream historical fact. In many rural societies, from ancient Greece to the Andean highlands, women took primary responsibility for small livestock while men tended to herding or long-distance grazing. Goats, chickens, and pigs were often considered the domestic economy, and women ran that economy with a mix of stubbornness and sheer practical genius. You step fully into that legacy now, broom in hand like the world's least glamorous scepter. You start with the chickens. You scatter grain with the elegance of someone tossing rice at a chaotic wedding. The birds swarm instantly, flapping, squawking, and performing interpretive dance movements that make you question every decision that led you here. You crouch to check the nesting boxes. 2 eggs, 1 warm, 1 cold, and 1 box that contains something fluffy and suspiciously featherless. You poke it with a finger, it squeaks. Oh, wonderful, a mouse baby. You lift it gingerly with a sigh and relocate it outside, muttering something about rodents staging a coup. It's not personal, it's just survival. A quirky tidbit pops into your mind. Medieval women sometimes put tiny chalk symbols inside chicken coops to ward off curses that were believed to stop hens from laying. You glance around the coop, half considering drawing a protective doodle yourself. Because honestly, with the way these chickens act, you wouldn't be surprised if someone cursed them out of pure annoyance. Next, you move to the goats. The goats watch you approach with the smug aura of creatures who know they can escape any time they want. One bleats loudly, demanding food with the confidence of someone who contributes 0 labor to this household. You pour feed into the trough and brace for impact. They dive in like overly enthusiastic toddlers at a candy buffet. You step back and begin checking the pen for weaknesses. Because goats, unlike reasonable beings, treat fences not as boundaries but as puzzles to solve. And historically, goat solving puzzles has never gone well for anyone. You notice a loose plank near the corner. Of course there's a loose plank. Goats can locate structural flaws faster than any engineer. You kneel to repair it, pressing the wood into place and securing it with the determination of someone who refuses to let a goat ruin her entire week. As you work, one of the goats leans its head against your back in what you hope is affection, but is more likely a disguised attempt to steal your hair tie. Historians still argue whether households with goats had higher stress levels or higher coping skills. Evidence is inconclusive. You suspect both are true. Goats teach patience, deep meditative patience, the kind monks envy. You stand, stretch your back, and step outside the pen, only to hear a sudden noise behind you. You whip around. One of the goats has escaped. Already. You blink once, twice, then say the kind of quiet, perfectly tame word that expresses deep spiritual suffering. Really? The goat trots around you like it's showing off. You walk slowly toward it, hands out, whispering sweet threats like, "I love you, but I will absolutely revoke your apple privileges." After a short chase that feels like an Olympic sport, you manage to guide it back into the pen. You shut the latch firmly. Twice, maybe 3 times. Because this goat is plotting. Oh yes, you can feel it. You check the water trough next. The water is murky. You sigh. You dump it out and refill it with fresh water from the well. As you do, you catch a glimpse of your reflection in the ripples, hair a bit wild, cheeks flushed, eyes focused. You look like a person who has handled more than most people will ever understand. You look capable. You look undefeated. You step around to the pig enclosure last. The pigs grunt softly, snuffling through the straw. They're calmer than goats, thankfully. Pigs historically were considered symbols of prosperity in many cultures, though also symbols of mischief. One nudges your leg with a damp snout as if reminding you it exists and deserves attention. You pat its head, appreciating the rare moment of gentle interaction. You finish checking their feed, reinforcing one wobbly fence post and clearing old straw. Your arms ache, your knees are dusty, and your apron now carries the faint perfume of barnyard chaos. You step back, surveying the space. Not perfect, not pristine, but cared for, protected, functional. As you leave the barn, the sun glints off the roof tiles, casting warm light across the yard. You breathe in deeply, filling your lungs with air that smells like hay and hard-earned accomplishment. This is what survival looks like. Not grand, not glamorous, but steady, determined, and quietly heroic. You close the barn door gently but firmly. The animals settle. The yard falls quiet. You've done it again. Alone. Competently. With humour and grit, even when the goats tested your will to live. You deserve a long drink of water, maybe two, maybe something stronger if the universe is kind tonight. You head back toward the house, dusting bits of straw from your skirt, when a familiar sound drifts over the fence, the rising, overlapping chatter of nearby women starting their morning gathering. It's not an official meeting or anything formal. No, this is the daily hum of the community's invisible engine. Women talking, trading news, sharing burdens, and occasionally judging each other's bread recipes with surgical precision. You follow the sound because you know what you need almost as much as you need food or water. Company. You cross the yard and step onto the narrow lane leading to your neighbour Maren's house. She's already outside, sweeping with the dramatic flair of someone auditioning for a tragic stage role. The broom swishes with purposeful force, scattering dust in elegant arcs. She looks up when she sees you and smiles with that tired warmth every woman here recognizes instantly. The look that says, "We're exhausted, but we're in this together." A mainstream historical fact. Throughout history, especially in rural or frontier communities, women relied on robust social networks for survival. These networks weren't casual friendships, they were lifelines. Women borrowed tools, shared food, exchanged childcare, and passed on critical knowledge about everything from herbal remedies to managing livestock. And when men were away for months, whether at sea, on military duty, or working seasonal jobs, these networks became the true backbone of daily life. You join Maren at her gate, leaning your elbows on the wooden rail. She's already talking before you even greet her. Something about her youngest child trying to escape the house at dawn, wearing only one shoe and a blanket as a superhero cape. You laugh, the kind of laugh that melts tension from your shoulders like warm sunlight. Soon, another neighbour approaches, then another, and just like that, you're in the middle of the morning's unofficial meeting of the Women Holding Everything Together Society. You trade updates on the weather, the harvest, the new travelling merchant who arrived yesterday with suspiciously shiny knives, and the fact that the miller's wife apparently baked a loaf so dense it could double as a defensive weapon. The group dissolves into laughter at that one. Because honestly, who among you hasn't created bread with structural integrity rivaling that of castle walls? A quirky tidbit surfaces in your mind, one you share aloud. In some ancient Greek villages, women gathered at communal ovens to bake bread together, partly because ovens were expensive, but mostly because gossip travelled better when accompanied by warm dough. The women around you nod as if this is the most logical tradition in the world. Honestly, you could implement that right here. Maybe call it heat-based social bonding. As you all talk, a small girl appears at her mother's side, clutching a doll with hair made of yarn. She peers up at you with wide eyes, the way children do when they're deciding if you're trustworthy or secretly a witch. You wiggle your fingers playfully. She giggles and hides behind her mother's skirt. It's a tiny moment, but it softens your heart like a warm pastry. Then, as always, the conversations deepen. They shift gently from jokes to genuine worries. Food shortages, sick animals, missing coin purses, the unpredictable weather, letters from faraway husbands that haven't arrived. You listen, adding your own concerns to the mix. It feels like placing small stones into a shared basket. The weight isn't gone, but it's distributed. Historians still argue whether these gatherings were primarily practical or emotional in nature. Some say they were organised around labour cooperation. Others insist they were emotional survival mechanisms disguised as chores. But you're living the answer right now, and you know the truth. It's both. You need help, yes, But you also need witnessing. Someone to hear you, see you, understand you. At some point, a dispute breaks out between two of the women about whether goats truly need more fencing, or whether they're simply spirits of chaos refusing confinement. You chime in from experience. They're absolutely spirits of chaos. Everyone agrees, except Maren, whose goat apparently behaves like a saint. You collectively decide she's lying or blessed. You all walk together toward the well, buckets swinging in a clumsy symphony. Fetching water is harder than most people imagine when they romanticize the past. It's not poetic, it's heavy, it sloshes, it splashes on your toes, but doing it with company, that makes it bearable. At the well, the conversations shift to softer topics. Songs children learned, the latest attempt someone made at preserving fruit, and the delightful rumour that a woman 3 houses away is secretly making spice cider out of last year's apples. You file that one away. You will visit her, for research purposes. As you haul your bucket up, arms trembling slightly, you feel the collective strength around you. None of you have the luxury of collapsing, but all of you have the comfort of knowing someone will pick up slack when necessary. When the group begins to disperse, Maren squeezes your hand briefly. No words, she doesn't need to say any. The gesture alone says, you're doing well. You're not alone. Come find us when you need to breathe. You walk back toward your house with the bucket in one hand and a lighter heart carried inside your chest. Your footsteps feel less heavy. Your mind feels less crowded. Community, women's community specifically, is not just helpful. It is civilization's oldest structural support beam. Without it, the whole system collapses. You reach your doorway, glance back once more at the scattering women, and feel the quiet truth settle into your bones. You may be running this household alone, but you're never truly alone. You return inside just long enough to drop off the bucket of water, wipe your hands on a cloth, and let out a slow breath. Then you step back outside, because the sky's climbing toward midday, and that means one thing: seasonal chores. The kind that can't be delayed, can't be negotiated with, and definitely can't be paused just because you feel like taking a nap under a nice tree somewhere. No, the land runs on its own timetable, and you're just trying to keep up without losing your mind. You walk toward the small plot of earth that pretends it's a garden, but really behaves more like a stubborn teenager refusing to cooperate. Seasonal chores are a rotating cast of responsibilities. Planting, weeding, harvesting, drying, preserving, depending on what month you're in. Right now there's a mixture of everything. Some plants begging for water, some crops practically shouting, "Pick me before I rot into mush," and a basket of herbs drying under the eaves that could blow away at any moment if the wind decides to be spicy today. A mainstream historical fact. In agricultural societies across the globe, women handled a large portion of seasonal work, especially in small-scale household plots. In medieval Europe, women sowed and weeded. In West African communities, they controlled entire crop cycles. In early Japan, rice planting was often a female-centered ritual. When men left for long journeys, women didn't just keep the home. They kept the entire food system from collapsing. You kneel beside the rows of vegetables, brushing aside leaves to inspect what's ready. The beans are plump and perfect. The carrots look promising except for one particularly dramatic carrot that seems to have split into 2 legs, like it's trying to run away. You pull it out and laugh. Nice try, you tell it. It is, admittedly, your third conversation today with something incapable of replying. You place the vegetables into your basket, one careful layer at a time so you don't crush anything and undo all your hard work. Then you check the herbs hanging nearby. Some have dried beautifully. Their leaves crumble between your fingers with that satisfying whispery texture. Others are still too moist, drooping like sad parsley refusing to commit to adulthood. You rearrange them, shifting the herbs away from the shade to catch more sun. A quirky tidbit floats to mind as you work. In parts of medieval France, women used to sing specific songs while harvesting, claiming it made the crops grow better. Whether it was superstition or just a way to keep boredom from swallowing them whole, historians still argue. You hum a tune, just in case. The plants don't respond, but you feel marginally more magical. You pause to straighten your back, stretching your spine with a low groan. Your hands are already dusty, fingernails lined with soil, and you've got one curl of hair plastered to your forehead. But there's something grounding in this. Literally grounding, since your hands are in the dirt. It connects you to all the women before you who knelt in fields, gardens, and plots just like this, tending to plants that didn't care about loneliness or missing letters or growing lists of chores. You move on to the next seasonal challenge, preservation. You carry your basket inside and set it on the table, rolling up your sleeves. Seasonal chores don't stop at harvesting. Now you need to make these vegetables last longer than your patience. You start with the beans, blanching, stringing, arranging them neatly to dry. Then the herbs get sorted into bundles, some for cooking, some for remedies, some for that neighbour who insists her headaches are caused by the moon. Historians still debate whether households preserved food out of necessity or tradition. But you know the truth firsthand. It's both necessity and insurance. Every jar you fill, every leaf you dry, every root you store is a quiet promise to your future self. You'll have enough. You'll be okay. You carry the newly prepared food outside to the drying racks. As you spread things out evenly, a breeze lifts the edges of the cloth, brushing your arms with cool fingers. You weigh down the corners with pebbles, small, smooth, familiar stones you've collected specifically for this purpose. Because if one thing can ruin your whole afternoon, it's a rogue gust of wind scattering your hard work across the yard like confetti. You step back, hands on your hips, surveying the result. It's good. The racks look tidy. The vegetables look vibrant. The herbs smell heavenly. Then, of course, you notice the storm clouds gathering in the distance. Because why would the sky ever be on your side? You watch the horizon with narrowed eyes. If it rains too soon, everything you just laid out to dry will be ruined. You chew your lip, calculating the time. The clouds are slow, heavy. You might have a couple of hours. You move quickly to tackle the last major seasonal chore of the day, turning the compost heap. You grab the pitchfork and jab it into the mound, flipping the layers of earth scraps and straw. It's smelly, hot, and deeply unglamorous. But this is what fertilizes your crops for the next season. Soil health is the quiet foundation of your survival, even if the compost heap smells like someone fermented disappointment. When you finish, sweat trickling down your spine, you check the sky again. The clouds have crept closer, like nosy neighbours who pretend they're not listening. Time to bring the herbs inside. You hurry to gather everything, moving with a speed that would impress even the laziest goat. Once everything is sheltered, you wipe your forehead and laugh. Soft, exhausted, but genuine. Seasonal work never ends. It just shifts shape, like a long dance with the land. You're never fully caught up, but you're never completely behind either. You live inside the rhythm, and today, once again, you've moved with it. You step back, inside just long enough to grab the small tool basket you keep by the door, the one overflowing with nails, scraps of twine, a dullish knife, 2 wooden wedges, and a hammer that has seen more drama than a royal court. Because maintaining a household alone means you're also the resident carpenter, roofer, plumber, fence fixer, barn patcher, and occasional inventor of wildly creative solutions that future archaeologists will stare at in confusion. You sling the basket over your arm and head toward the corner of the house where yesterday's storm decided to bully your roof tiles. You tilt your head up. There it is. One tile neatly out of place, sticking up like a rebellious tuft of hair refusing to be brushed. You squint at it the same way you've squinted at every problem today, half determined, half over it. A mainstream historical fact. Across cultures, from medieval England to Mughal India, women often handled small household repairs when men were away. Not because it was women's work, but because survival didn't wait for anyone. If a hinge broke or a roof leaked, you fixed it, or you lived with water dripping onto your face while you slept. And honestly, you have enough problems without accidental indoor rainfall. You drag a small wooden stool over to the wall and climb onto it, then onto the lower ledge, then onto the roof, moving with the grace of someone who has climbed this exact route 100 times, and still mildly fears sliding off and becoming a cautionary tale. The roof tiles are warm under your palms. The wind brushes your hair back. You place the loose tile back into its slot, pressing until it clicks into place. Then you secure the edge with a wedge of wood you whittled last month, the one that fits so perfectly it feels like destiny. You sit there a moment, catching your breath. From this height, the yard looks small and calm, like nothing ever goes wrong. A lie, obviously, but a pleasant one. A quirky tidbit you remember while perched there. In certain Nordic villages, women carved protective symbols onto roof beams, believing it kept storms from ripping tiles away. You trace a tiny swirl onto the wooden edge with your fingertip. Not superstitious, just sentimental. Maybe it helps, maybe it doesn't. Historians still argue whether such symbols were charms, signatures, or early forms of artistic rebellion. You personally believe they were all three. You climb down slowly, joints popping like you're made of crunchy breadsticks. The moment your feet touch the ground, you hear it. The unmistakable clatter of something falling. You pivot sharply. The gate latch has snapped. Wonderful. You cross the yard, lift the latch, and inspect the damage. The metal piece is cracked, weakened from rust and last winter's frost. You run a thumb along the fracture line and nod. You can fix this. You dig into your basket and pull out an improvised solution. A short length of leather strap punched with holes from a previous repair. Not elegant, but functional. You loop it through the gate hook and secure it with 2 nails, hammering them into the wood with a rhythm you find weirdly therapeutic. Tap, tap, tap. You test it. It holds. The gate shuts with a satisfying thump, no longer swinging wildly like a drunk relative at a festival. Feeling smug, you turn around and immediately spot your next problem. The rain barrel's tap is leaking again. A thin bead of water trails down the wood like it's trying to signal distress. You kneel beside it, tighten the tap, and seal the seam with a strip of cloth coated in wax. When the dripping stops, you sit back, triumphant, like you've just negotiated peace between rival kingdoms. But the day's not done. You still have the tool shed hinges to deal with. Last week, one hinge began squealing with a loud, soul-violating screech every time you open the door. The kind of sound that wakes the dead, terrifies small children, and makes you question your life choices. You grab your small jar of oil and march toward the shed. You open the door a few inches. Squeak! You wince. You mutter something polite but menacing. Then you dip your fingers into the oil and rub it generously over the hinge. You work it in with the persistence of someone who has fully accepted that modern conveniences like WD-40 are centuries away from being invented. You open the door again. Smooth, silent, dignified. You close it. Silent. You smile, proud and slightly smug. This hinge will not defeat you. As you walk back toward the house, tool basket knocking gently against your hip, you catch sight of the fence by the orchard. One slat has loosened, probably from the wind. You tap it lightly and hear the hollow thunk of wood begging for reinforcement. You nail it back in place, humming a little melody from earlier, a harvest song you don't fully remember but sing anyway, because it keeps your rhythm steady. By now your hands are dirty, your braid is messy, your shoulders ache, and your feet feel like they've lived 10 lifetimes. But there's something comforting in this exhaustion. Something grounding about solving problems one at a time, turning chaos into order with nothing but tools, patience, and stubbornness. Historians still argue whether women enjoyed or resented repair work. Diaries show mixed feelings, a blend of pride, irritation, and necessity. But as you wipe your hands on your apron and look around the property, roof aligned, gate secured, barrel sealed, fence tightened, you feel that quiet, private spark of satisfaction that only comes from fixing things with your own hands. You gather your tools, close your basket, and head inside as the afternoon sun softens into gold. Your house stands a little stronger now, because of you. You slip back inside the house, tool basket set aside, and let the familiar quiet settle around you like a soft blanket. But it doesn't last long, because even on the calmest days raising, children alone means peace is not a permanent resident, just a visitor who occasionally drops by, looks around nervously and leaves quickly before chaos notices. You hear small footsteps in the next room, then a muffled thump, then the unmistakable sound of something being dragged that absolutely should not be dragged. You close your eyes, inhale, exhale. You walk toward the noise. You find your youngest sitting on the floor beside a wooden stool, one that is very clearly not where it was 5 minutes ago, and they look up at you with the wide-eyed innocence of someone who knows exactly what they did, but is hoping you don't. The stool has a smear of mud on it. The child also has a smear of mud on their cheek. You resist the urge to ask how this happened. You don't want to know. You really don't. You lift the stool, set it upright, and brush your child's hair back from their forehead. Why? You ask gently. They shrug, the universal shrug of children everywhere across all of history. A shrug that says, I don't know. Life compelled me. A mainstream historical fact. In many societies where men travelled for work, war, or trade, Whether Viking communities, rural Japan, or early colonial settlements, women raised children largely on their own for months or years at a time. They taught morals, oversaw chores, managed discipline, ensured safety, and did it all without another adult to say, "Your turn." Parenting alone wasn't unusual, it was expected. Women became the stabilizing force, the emotional anchor, the rule setter, and the comforter. You guide your child toward the wash basin and wipe their face clean with a damp cloth. They squirm, of course. Children have two modes: perfectly still when you need them to move, and squirming like octopi when you need them to be still. You clean them anyway, humming an old lullaby under your breath. As you finish, your older child pokes their head around the doorway. "Is lunch ready yet?" they ask, which is child code for, "I'm hungry, but don't want to do anything useful." You raise an eyebrow. "Did you finish your chores?" They hesitate, and in that split-second hesitation, you know chores were absolutely not finished. You put your hands on your hips and give them the look, not the angry look, not the disappointed look, the "I'm too tired for this nonsense" look, the one that has ended rebellions, started chores, and prevented civilizations from collapsing. They sigh and vanish to complete their tasks. You follow behind, checking their work more out of instinct than mistrust. The floor is swept, mostly. The firewood is stacked, mostly. And the folded linens are in a lopsided pile that technically counts as folded if you squint hard enough and lower your standards dramatically. You fix a few pieces here and there, not because you're controlling, because you're tired of refolding them later at midnight. A quirky tidbit surfaces. In some Roman households, children were expected to perform small chores as early as age 6, often supervised by their mothers or by older siblings acting as tiny assistant managers. You glance at your eldest. They could absolutely be a tiny assistant manager, if only they were motivated by something other than snacks. You direct them toward helping with lunch preparations, fetching herbs, stirring the pot, not setting things on fire. Simple contributions, but important ones. Children learn by doing, and in a household without another adult, the learning curve is steep but necessary. As they work, you watch them with that blend of pride and exasperation familiar to parents across centuries. They stir too fast, spill a few drops, then look up at you with hopeful eyes. "Good?" they ask. You smile softly. "Good enough." Historians still argue whether single-parent households in pre-industrial times were more stressful or more tightly bonded. The truth hides in moments like this, moments where frustration and love sit side by side, both equally fierce. After lunch, you send the children outside to play while you tidy the kitchen. You can hear them through the window, running, laughing, arguing, inventing elaborate worlds where sticks become swords and rocks become treasure. Their voices blend into the afternoon, weaving a soundscape that keeps loneliness from settling too deeply in your chest. But later, when one of them scrapes a knee, they run to you with tears and trembling lips. You kneel, clean the wound, blow gently to ease the sting, and hold them in your arms until their breathing slows. You smooth their hair and whisper reassurance. You don't have the luxury of calling for someone else to help. Not today, not ever on days like this. You are the comfort. You are the shelter. You tuck them close, feeling the small heartbeat against your shoulder, and you realize, again, that raising children alone is not just work. It's the quiet shaping of future adults. It's building strength in them through your own strength, even when you feel frayed at the edges. You let them go back to play, standing at the doorway a moment longer than necessary, watching them run across the yard. They are loud, they are messy, they are exhausting, and they are yours. You close the door gently, the afternoon light spilling around you, and breathe out a soft sigh. You're doing this. You're really doing this. You barely have time to wipe down the table before a shadow crosses the doorway, long, sharp, unmistakably official. You freeze for half a breath, that particular tension curling through your shoulders like a cold draft. Because nothing derails a perfectly functional afternoon quite like the arrival of someone who carries a ledger, a seal, or the authority to ruin your peaceful day with a single raised eyebrow. You set the cloth aside, straighten your spine, and step toward the entrance. Standing there is a man in travel-worn clothes, carrying a leather satchel bulging with scrolls. His expression wears that familiar mixture, mildly tired, mildly superior, mildly annoyed by the existence of other humans, a tax collector, or a land steward, or a scribe delivering notices. They all wear the same, I hold paperwork face. You give him a polite nod. Afternoon? He returns it stiffly, eyes scanning past you into your home as if evaluating your worth by the neatness of your shelves. "I bring news," he says, "and questions." Wonderful. You love questions, especially the intrusive ones. A mainstream historical fact across countless societies, feudal Europe, Qing China, Mughal India. When men were absent for long stretches, women became the default representatives of the household dealing with officials. This often left them negotiating taxes, land disputes, census records, and supply requisitions with people who were not always eager to acknowledge their authority. Sometimes women prevailed. Sometimes officials pretended not to hear them. Sometimes an entire conversation unfolded like a passive-aggressive chess match. You lead him to the table, offering a seat. He remains standing. Of course he does. You resist the urge to roll your eyes. He pulls out his scroll with a dramatic flourish that suggests he practices in the mirror. "There is a record discrepancy," he begins. "There is always a record discrepancy." You fold your hands calmly. "What kind?" He clears his throat. "It appears your household's grain tithe was recorded as late last season." You exhale silently through your nose. That tithe wasn't late. They lost the record. Again. You know this because the last collector was clearly new, nervous, and had the organisational skills of a dropped sack of potatoes. You keep your voice level. "The tithe was submitted on time. I witnessed the marking myself." He frowns slightly, either annoyed or confused, possibly both. The ledger indicates otherwise. You smile politely, the kind of smile that hides the ferocity of someone running an entire household alone while maintaining an impeccable memory. Then the ledger is incorrect. He blinks, slowly. Officials across history were not used to being told they were wrong by anyone, let alone a woman standing in a flour-dusted apron who looks like she could fix a roof tile with her teeth. To your surprise, he doesn't argue. Instead, he produces another scroll and unrolls it deliberately. Additionally, he continues, there is a request from the magistrate's office. They require an updated list of occupants. Ah, the census. Everyone's favourite exercise in bureaucracy. He asks you a series of questions, names, ages, household responsibilities, livestock counts. You answer each one clearly and calmly, even when he mispronounces your children's names like he's deciphering ancient runes. You correct him once, then again. On the third attempt, you just let it go. You have emotional limits. A quirky historical tidbit pops into your mind as he scribbles. In some regions of the early Ottoman Empire, women handled all census reporting in rural households, and scribes occasionally complained in their notes that the women remember too much, implying they couldn't be tricked or confused. You take that as a compliment across time. Then comes the worst question. And your husband's location? You feel that familiar prick in your chest, the ache that never fully settles. "Travelling," you say softly, "due to return when his work is complete." The official scratches this down, glancing at you with something that almost looks like sympathy, or maybe curiosity. Historians still argue whether officials respected the burdens women carried, or saw them as temporary placeholders. You suspect the truth depended entirely on the individual. He finishes his notes and rolls his scrolls back up. "I will mark your tithe as current," he says at last. Translation: "I believe you, but I won't admit the mistake outright because my pride is fragile." You nod graciously. "Appreciated." He turns to leave, pausing only to ask if you have any disputes or petitions to file. You could mention the neighbour's goat constantly invading your garden. You could complain about the miller's new apprentice being rude. You could request repairs on the crumbling road. But honestly, you're too tired. "No petitions," you say. He nods, steps outside, and walks away with all the gravitas of someone who thinks carrying scrolls makes them mysterious. The moment he's out of sight, you exhale fully. The house seems to relax with you, its walls softening, its floorboards sighing under your feet. You wander outside again, letting the sunlight warm your face. Interacting with officials always leaves a strange aftertaste, equal parts irritation and relief. But today at least the outcome was fair. You tighten your apron strings, feeling the mental shift as you step back into your role as the household's lone negotiator, advocate, and defender. You did well. You were steady. You held your ground. And the day continues. You linger in the doorway after the official leaves, letting the quiet settle again. But something in your instincts tightens, a subtle prickle at the base of your neck, the kind that whispers, don't relax yet. Because as much as you want to sink into a chair and drink something warm, living alone with children and livestock and crops and fragile fences means you can never fully clock out. Not really. Not when the world outside your walls doesn't pause just because you're tired. You glance toward the tree line. Still. Calm. But you've lived long enough to know that calm is nature's favourite setup for nonsense. You take a slow breath and walk the perimeter again. Not because you plan to, but because something in your bones urges you. The air has shifted, gaining that faint metallic chill that always warns you of night approaching earlier than expected. You tug your shawl tighter and scan the edges of your property. A mainstream historical fact. Women left alone for long stretches were often responsible for defending their homes against threats, human or otherwise. In early colonial settlements, women loaded muskets and barred doors. In rural China, they set perimeter alarms with pottery shards. In parts of Eastern Europe, they kept long sticks by the door specifically to chase off wolves or would-be thieves. Defense wasn't heroic. It was daily survival. You're living that truth now. You check the barn first. The door latch holds, though one hinge groans faintly like it's considering rebellion. You push the door open and peek inside. The animals stir, shifting in their straw beds. One goat gives you a suspicious look, as if you've interrupted its secret villain meeting. The chickens cluck sleepily. Everything seems normal, but as you turn to leave, you hear a rustling behind the haystack. You freeze. You listen. Silence. You take one cautious step toward it, then another. You grip your broom like a weapon, ready to confront whatever is hiding there. A fox, a raccoon, a very confused chicken. Anything is possible. You nudge the hay gently with your foot. A cat leaps out. You yelp. The cat yelps. The cat bolts. You put a hand over your heart and whisper, "Rude." A quirky historical tidbit pops into your mind. Some medieval households kept cats specifically for protection, not just against mice, but as alert systems. Cats notice everything. They stare at empty corners. They hiss at nothing. Were they effective alarms? Historians still argue whether cats genuinely protected households or simply made everyone paranoid. You step out of the barn, still recovering from your feline-induced jump scare, and continue your patrol. The shadows lengthen as you walk, stretching across the yard like dark fingers. You test the fence along the orchard again, secure. Then you move toward the outer gate, checking the ground for prints. You've learned to recognize them over time. Hoof marks from neighboring goats, paw prints from stray dogs, small, delicate tracks from birds. Today, though, you notice something new. A series of deeper impressions near the vegetable patch, spaced far apart. Heavy steps, human steps, and not yours. You kneel, touching the edges of one print. It's fresh. The soil is still, soft. Someone passed through earlier. Your breath catches, just for a moment, but you force your mind to stay steady. You look toward the road. There's no sign of anyone now. Maybe it was a passerby. Maybe someone cutting across property lines. Maybe a harmless traveller or a child from the village, or maybe not. You stand slowly, scanning the horizon. In many eras, women tracked footprints like this every day, gauging risk, deciding when to stay alert, when to bring animals inside early, when to lock the door before sunset. Defensive awareness was a skill, not a luxury. You head inside to check your door bolts. The top one slides in smoothly, but the bottom one resists. You crouch down, inspecting the metal. It's slightly bent, probably from last winter's freeze. You grab a small hammer and tap it gently back into alignment until it slides cleanly into place. The satisfying click of a secure lock settles your nerves a little. You turn toward the window next. The shutters close firmly, but the latch wiggles. Not enough to break, but enough to annoy you. You tie a piece of cloth around it for reinforcement. You note the repair for tomorrow. Then you gather the children in the main room. They're playing with pebbles and sticks arranged in dramatic battle formations you pretend not to understand. "Inside now," you say softly. "Stay close." Your eldest studies your face with the intuition only children possess. "Is something wrong?" You smooth their hair back. "No, just being careful." Historians still argue whether women exaggerated dangers to teach vigilance or downplayed dangers to soothe their families. You suspect the truth is a blend. You do whatever the moment requires. For now, you kindle the evening fire early. The warm glow spreads through the house, easing the shadows and creating a soft circle of safety around all of you. You prepare a small meal, keeping your movement calm so the children don't catch your early attention. But as you stir the pot, you keep glancing toward the window, listening, not for something specific, just for anything unusual. A snapped twig, a low growl, footsteps that don't belong. Defense isn't about weapons or walls, it's about awareness. It's about refusing to be caught off guard because you're the only adult here, and you can't afford to be surprised. When night finally settles, you check everything one more time. Doors, shutters, animals, tools. Then you light a small oil lamp and place it by the entrance. An old trick. It signals that someone is awake, alert. Not an easy target. You settle onto your chair, children curled nearby, fire crackling softly. You've defended your home today, not with swords or shields, but with vigilance, foresight, and stubborn, quiet strength. This house is safe tonight, because you made it safe. When the house finally settles into its nighttime rhythm, fire low, children drowsy, the wind humming against the shutters, you allow yourself a breath. Just one. Because even in this small pocket of calm, your responsibilities haven't loosened their grip. The lantern on the table flickers softly, casting warm amber ripples across the walls. That's your cue. Time for letters and messages, the invisible threads that connect your isolated household to the wider world. You pull out the small wooden box where you keep everything. Scraps of parchment, bits of charcoal, a chipped inkwell, stray ribbons, and a handful of letters so worn from rereading that the creases have creases. You set the box on the table and sit down slowly, letting the chair embrace your weight like it knows you need the support. A mainstream historical fact. Throughout centuries, whether in Roman provinces, medieval villages, or 19th century frontier towns, women were often the primary writers, readers, and interpreters of household correspondence. They composed the letters, tracked delivery schedules, negotiated with local messengers, and preserved vital notes in jars, boxes, or behind beams. Men might travel, but women kept communication alive. You lay out a blank sheet and smooth its edges. It feels intimidating. Too clean, too open, too expectant. You dip your quill into the ink, tapping the excess on the rim as you gather your thoughts. Writing to someone far away requires an odd mixture of honesty and restraint. You want to say everything, but paper is precious, ink is expensive, and emotions are complicated. You start slowly. You write about the children, how your eldest has grown a little taller, how the youngest insists the broom is secretly alive. You mention the weather, because weather shapes everything you do. You describe the harvest progress, the new goat-related chaos, the official who visited, the fence repair you accomplished alone. You pause. Your hand trembles just a little. Then you allow yourself one line about missing him. Not dramatic, not poetic, just true. You blow gently on the ink to dry it. The act feels intimate, fragile. You fold the letter carefully and tie it with a thin piece of twine. Then you reach for the older letters, the ones he sent you. Some are short, some are long, some are smudged from rain. Some contain hurried handwriting that slants sharply, like the quill was racing against time. You read one at random. He describes the place he's working, rocky, windy, hard on the hands. He mentions a companion who snores loudly, a local market where someone tried to overcharge him for a loaf of bread, and a river that looks eerie at dawn. He ends, always, with a promise to return. You trace that line with your finger, sensing the echo of his presence in the strokes of the ink. A quirky tidbit slips into your memory. In some early medieval monasteries, scribes sometimes wrote tiny doodles, dragons, hands, flowers, into the margins of letters or manuscripts, partly out of boredom, partly to personalize the writing. You notice one of your husband's letters has a barely noticeable drawing in the corner, a crooked heart. You smile despite yourself. You gather all the letters, including your newest one, and slip them back into the box. The lid closes softly, but the feelings inside remain very much awake. Now, you must prepare it for delivery. You step outside with the lamp, letting the night air cool your face. The stars shimmer faintly, scattered like spilled grain across the sky. Down the road, where the path bends beyond the elm tree, a courier sometimes passes through at dawn. Not daily, not reliably, but enough that you know to leave a message on the small wooden hook nailed to the fence post. You walk to the post, lantern swinging gently, and hang the parcel there. You place a small sprig of rosemary on top, your signal that the message is urgent but not an emergency. Every community has its own code. Yours is no exception. You walk back toward the house, but halfway across the yard you freeze. A faint scraping sound, not threatening, not alarming, just odd. You tilt your head, listening. It's coming from near the shed. Heart steady, you walk over and lift the lamp. A stranger, a fox, a supernatural omen. No, it's your neighbour's eldest son trying to wedge a note between the slats of your shed door. He startles so hard he nearly drops the paper. "Sorry," he blurts. "Mother told me to bring this. She didn't want to wake the household." You sigh in relief and gesture for him to hand it over. He does, then sprints away like someone who fears being chased by goats. You open the note. It's from Maren. She writes that she's sending her daughter tomorrow to help with drying herbs, and she also warns that a merchant passed through earlier asking questions about households with men away. Historians still argue whether communities protected each other fiercely or competed quietly. You know from experience, women protect women, always. You fold the note and tuck it into your apron, that small prickle of unease returning but softened by the comfort of knowing you're not navigating the world alone. You step back inside and bolt the door. The lamp casts soft golden pools across the floorboards as you return to the table, hands still tingling with leftover adrenaline, but calmer now. You sit, letting the glow of the fire brush your face with warmth. The children sleep, the messages are sent, the replies are kept safe. Communication, like everything else in your life, is something you maintain with gentle ferocity, because words matter and distance can be bridged if someone keeps writing. Tonight, that someone is you, and you've done it well. The quiet of the evening deepens, settling thick and warm around you like a blanket that smells faintly of smoke, herbs, and the day's exhaustion. You stand at the wash basin for a moment, letting the cool water slip over your hands. It's soothing, until you feel that small flutter in your chest. Not fear, not anxiety. Just a soft whisper. Is everyone healthy? Is everyone safe? Because living alone with children means you're the doctor, nurse, healer, comforter, and emotional support creature all in one slightly fraying package. You dry your hands and step toward the shelf where you keep your small collection of remedies. Clay jars of dried herbs, bundles tied with twine, a cracked bowl where you grind leaves into powder, and the smell, sharp, earthy, comforting. Like a miniature apothecary run by someone who definitely didn't go to medical school but learned enough from mothers, grandmothers and neighbours to be dangerous in a helpful way. A mainstream historical fact. In almost every pre-modern society, Europe, Africa, Asia, Indigenous America, women were the primary keepers of household medicine. They treated fevers, stitched wounds, brewed teas, mixed poultices, and recognised illnesses long before doctors could travel miles to reach them. They learned remedies through generational knowledge, communal teaching, and trial and error. When men travelled or worked far from home, women kept entire families alive using whatever tools the land provided. You check each jar carefully. The mint leaves are low. The feverfew is still plentiful, thank goodness. The dried ginger root needs replenishing soon. And the comfrey, you shake the jar gently, barely enough. Comfrey is too valuable to run out of, good for bruises, aches, and the occasional clumsy child who falls off the stool again despite being warned 12 times. As you sort the jars, a small cough sounds from the sleeping corner. You glance over. One of the children shifts, curling tighter into their blanket. You walk to them quietly, smooth their hair, and place a hand near their forehead. Warm but not hot. Probably nothing. Probably just dreams. Still, you kneel by the hearth and warm a little water. You add a pinch of crushed herbs, mint and chamomile, letting the scent unfurl into the room. When it's ready, you pour it into a tiny cup and set it aside for when they wake. Preventive care is its own quiet form of love. Then your mind drifts, because it always does at this hour, to that time months ago when a fever swept through the village. You remember waking in the middle of the night to check on your children, feeling for heat, listening for ragged breaths. You remember mixing remedies by lantern light while the rest of the world slept. You remember the weight of that fear, the fear of losing more than you could bear. You survived it. They survived it. And that knowledge strengthens your spine even now. A quirky historical tidbit surfaces. In some medieval English, Villages, women made witch bottles, little jars filled with herbs, salt, iron nails, and sometimes hair or string, buried near doorways to ward off illness. Were they medical? Magical? Historians still argue, but you kind of understand the impulse. When you're responsible for people you love, you'll try anything. You return to the table and begin grinding a small batch of herbs just to replenish your stores. The pestle moves rhythmically, each circle a tiny meditation. Powder rises in soft green clouds settling on your sleeves. The scent fills your lungs and clears your thoughts. The world outside is dangerous. Illness can come without warning. But here, inside these walls, you do everything in your power to keep your family well. Once the herbs are stored, you prepare a small salve for tomorrow's chores. Your hands ache from gripping tools all day, and you know they'll be stiff by morning. You mix warmed animal fat with crushed calendula petals until it blends into a smooth golden paste. When you rub it into your knuckles, the warmth sinks in slowly, easing the tightness. A small mercy, a small moment of care for yourself, rare but necessary. Historians still argue whether women in pre-industrial households had higher resilience to illness because of their constant exposure to herbs, remedies, and active lifestyles. Others argue the opposite, that exhaustion weakened them. You suspect the truth is far more complicated. Strength born from necessity, vulnerability born from overload, health balanced on a knife's edge. A soft whimper breaks the quiet. One of the children stirs again. You go to them immediately. The room is lit only by the fire's slow, pulsing glow. You kneel, brush the hair from their forehead, and whisper their name gently. Their eyes flutter open, heavy, dazed, but calm. You offer the small cup of warm herb water. They sip slowly, gaze unfocused, trusting. You carry them back to their blanket, tucking them in with the kind of tenderness that stitches itself into memory. As they drift back to sleep, you stay beside them for a moment, hand resting lightly on their back, feeling the steady rise and fall of their breath. This is what healing looks like. Quiet, vigilance, gentle hands, endless responsibility wrapped in fragile hope. You stand, stretching your tired shoulders, and whisper a soft promise into the dim room. You will keep them safe. You will keep them well. You will carry the knowledge of countless women before you and countless women after. Tonight, your remedies worked. Tonight, your home is steady. Tonight, health holds. And you, exhausted but unbroken, move forward into the warm blue hush of the evening. The night settles deeper, thickening like warm velvet around the edges of the room. The fire flickers low, drawing soft gold lines across the walls, and for a moment you let yourself imagine that the world outside has paused, that no responsibilities exist except this quiet. But of course, quiet never lasts long when you live in a community where everyone knows everything about everyone. Because now comes another weight you carry alone, social expectations. You move around the room slowly, straightening blankets, adjusting the dying fire, letting your mind drift toward the thing that's harder to manage than livestock, illness, or even taxes, other people's opinions. You step outside to shake crumbs from the cloth you used earlier, and immediately you spot movement across the lane. 2 women heading to fetch late water from the well. They see you. They wave, they whisper, they wave again. You press your lips together and smile politely. Here we go. A mainstream historical fact. In nearly every society before the modern era, a woman's reputation was treated like a fragile, precious, endlessly scrutinized thing. When men traveled for long stretches, at sea, in armies, in caravans, at distant work sites, their wives became subjects of even closer observation. Neighbors watched who visited, how late lanterns burned, whether children behaved, whether chores were done appropriately. A household run by a woman alone often became a community spectacle, sometimes supportive, sometimes judgmental, sometimes downright nosy. You toss the crumbs into the dirt and wipe your hands on your apron. Almost instantly a voice floats across the lane. "You're up late tonight," calls one of the women. Harmless words, but you hear the edges, the curiosity, the invitation for conversation, maybe even the hint of an unspoken question. You nod politely. "Just tidying." They nod back, but their heads tilt toward each other, whispering again as they walk away. You sigh. This is the tricky part. maintaining a reputation solid enough to avoid trouble, but not so rigid that you suffocate. You need community support, but you also need space to breathe, raise your children, and run your household without every decision being a public performance. You step back inside, close the door gently, and lean against it for a moment. The pressure from outside never truly stops pressing on the wood. A quirky historical tidbit comes to mind. In 17th century villages, women often placed brooms bristles up by their doors to signal privacy. A subtle message to neighbours that now was not a good time to chat. Some scholars say it was symbolic, others insist it was literal broom storage. Historians still argue, of course, but you wish you could adopt the custom right now. You sit by the table again, stare at your hands, and think about how much energy goes into simply appearing proper. Not for vanity, for survival. Gossip spreads faster than illness. A misinterpreted gesture can become a full-blown scandal by morning. Even the smallest deviation, like leaving your lantern lit too late, might spark questions. Earlier today, for example, one neighbour asked if you were managing all right. That loaded phrase wrapped in concern but carrying a hint of judgment. Were your chores done? Were the children under control? Did the goats escape again? Did you seem frazzled, too tired, too proud, too lonely? Sometimes you want to stand in the middle of the square and shout, "I am doing everything humanly possible. Please let me live." But you don't. Instead, you maintain the balance. You help with community chores when you can. You share herbs. You participate in festivals. You send your children to help neighbours. You keep your home neat enough that no one can accuse you of neglect and messy enough that no one suspects you're performing perfection. Historians still debate whether women use social spaces to support each other or to police each other. You know the truth. It's both, depending on the day, depending on the person, depending on how exhausted everyone is. You wander into the small side room where your washing basin sits. You check your reflection in the faint mirror-like surface of the water, hair slightly messy, apron dust-stained, eyes tired but focused. You look like a woman carrying 12 invisible baskets at once. You smooth your hair, not because you need to look beautiful, but because appearances safeguard peace. Because the more put together you appear, the fewer questions people ask. And the fewer questions asked, the less attention drawn to your vulnerabilities. You return to the main room and sit for a moment on the edge of the bed. Your body aches from bending, lifting, stirring, carrying, thinking, always thinking. Above all, thinking about how to navigate a world where every action might be quietly observed. You remember the woman 3 houses down, a widow whose lamp burned late for weeks while she tended to her sick son. Rumours sprouted like weeds. People whispered about visitors, money troubles, improper behaviour. None of it was true, of course. She was simply fighting to keep her child alive. But truth doesn't always matter to people seeking entertainment. You promised yourself after that. You'd be careful. You'd be vigilant. You'd be strong enough to weather both storms and whispers. Just then, a soft knock at your door breaks your thoughts. You tense, just for a moment, then open it a crack. It's Maren. She stands there with a small loaf wrapped in cloth. "Left over from dinner," she says. "Don't let the others see or they'll think I favour you." You smile, a real one. "Thank you." She nods, her face warm, her eyes understanding everything you didn't say. "Sleep well," she murmurs before turning away. When you close the door, your chest feels lighter, because yes, social scrutiny is heavy, but solidarity is heavier, and tonight someone carried a little bit of your load for you. The house finally grows quiet, children asleep, fire reduced to a low amber glow, and the night settling over everything like a soft wool blanket. You sit in the hush, hands resting in your lap, listening to the faint sounds of the world outside. Crickets, distant dogs, the occasional sigh of wind brushing against the shutters. It's peaceful, it's gentle, and it's here, in this stillness, that loneliness slips out from wherever it hides during the busy hours. Not loud, not dramatic, just present. You lean back in your chair, neck tilting toward the ceiling, and let your eyes soften. The day has been long, a sequence of chores, crises, fixes, small victories, and constant motion. But now that the motion has stopped, the emptiness settles in like a quiet guest pulling up a stool beside you. A mainstream historical fact. Women whose husbands travelled for long months, whether sailors' wives in coastal villages, frontier homesteaders, medieval merchants' wives, or seasonal labourers' partners, often documented intense emotional rhythms in their diaries or letters. Loneliness wasn't constant. It came in waves, most often at night, when tasks faded and the weight of silence grew heavier. You understand that rhythm all too well. You get up slowly and move to the small shelf near the window, running your fingertips along the wooden edge. The curtain sways gently, stirred by a draught. You pull it aside just enough to peek outside. Moonlight spills across the yard, turning everything silver. The fence, the trees, the path leading toward the road. It looks almost unreal, like the world has been sketched in soft chalk. You imagine him walking down that road toward you. You imagine his silhouette appearing by the gate. You imagine the children waking to his laugh. You close the curtain. Not tonight. You return to the chair and curl your legs beneath you. Loneliness has a strange texture. It's heavy and hollow at the same time. And when you're the only adult in the house, it isn't just emotional, it's physical. No warm presence beside you. No second pair of footsteps. No voice to share stray thoughts with. Even the bed feels too wide, like a field of empty sheets. A quirky historical tidbit comes to mind, uninvited but oddly comforting. In some coastal towns, wives of sailors kept a small candle burning on the window ledge each night, not just to guide ships, but to give themselves the illusion of companionship. A flickering light in an otherwise dark room. Something alive, something warm. You look at your lamp and smile a little. Maybe that's why you've kept it lit longer tonight. You reach for your shawl and pull it around your shoulders, inhaling its faint scent of herbs and wood smoke. The fabric holds memories. You wore it during last winter's storms, during spring planting, during the fever nights when you barely slept. It has seen you through every season of longing. Historians still argue whether prolonged loneliness made women more resilient or more fragile. Diaries from Icelandic farmers' wives describe loneliness as the silent winter. Letters from 18th century sailors' wives describe it as the echo in the room. You think both are true. Loneliness can sharpen you, and it can hollow you. Sometimes in the same hour, you stand again, unable to sit still. You pace the room softly, careful not to wake the children. Your hands glide over objects, a bowl, a chair, a wooden spoon, as if grounding yourself through touch. The room feels different at night, almost like a different world. The shadows are longer, the corners seem deeper, the silence fuller. You pause by the hearth and crouch to push a glowing ember toward the center. The little flame brightens stubbornly. You admire it, a tiny spark refusing to give up. Maybe that's you too. You sit on the floor near the fire, arms wrapped around your knees. You let the warmth soak into your bones. Your thoughts drift, inevitably toward memories. Some sharp, some soft, some half forgotten, like worn pages of a book. The day he left, his hand on the back of your neck, the way he hesitated before letting go. The nights you waited for letters, pacing, hoping, fearing silence more than bad news. The mornings you woke alone, stretching into cold sheets, reminding yourself he was out there somewhere beneath the same sky. You rest your forehead on your knees, feeling the heaviness bloom. But then something shifts, a small sound, the children shifting in their sleep, the fire cracking, the wind sighing, life still happening around you. You lift your head and breathe in slowly, letting the ache expand, then soften. Loneliness doesn't mean you've failed. It means you are human. It means you care deeply. It means you carry more than most people will ever understand. You rise, move to the bed, and sit on the edge for a moment before lying down. The sheets are cool. The pillow is familiar. You curl into yourself, feeling both the emptiness beside you and the strength inside you. You whisper into the dark, not expecting an answer. I'm here. Not for him. For you. Because tomorrow will come with its chaos and chores and challenges, and you will face it, tired, perhaps lonely but grounded, capable, unbroken. You close your eyes. Even loneliness can't eclipse the truth. You are doing this. You're carrying everything. And somehow, miraculously, you're still standing. Morning creeps back into the house with a softness that almost feels apologetic, as if it knows last night weighed heavily on your chest and is trying to make amends with a gentle sunrise. The children stir slowly, stretching like little cats under their blankets, rubbing sleep from their eyes. You rise with them, stifling a yawn and light the hearth back to life. A new day begins, and today brings its own demands, traditions, rituals, and the complicated dance of keeping seasonal festivals alive even when the household feels halved in spirit. You wrap a shawl around your shoulders and step outside to feel the air. It's crisp, cool enough to sting your cheeks, warm enough to promise a comfortable day. And in the distance you hear it. Faint voices, laughter, the stirring energy of a village preparing for a festival. Maybe it's harvest season, maybe it's a holy day. Maybe it's the yearly gathering to honor ancestors. Every region, every era has its rhythms, and festivals are non-negotiable. They're how communities remember who they are. A mainstream historical fact. When men were gone for months or years, women upheld nearly all seasonal rituals alone, lighting offerings, preparing special foods, decorating homes, weaving wreaths, blessing crops, attending ceremonies. These weren't optional. Festivals were tied to community identity, agricultural cycles, and spiritual well-being. And if a household didn't participate, people noticed. You walk toward your herb racks first, checking which bundles are ready to use. Today calls for fragrance. Lavender, dried rose petals, maybe a pinch of mint. You gather them into a small bowl and inhale deeply. The scent lifts your mood a little, pulling you gently away from last night's heavy thoughts. The children join you, still sleepy but excited. Festivals to them mean treats, noise, and a break from chores. You hand each of them a small task, fetching a ribbon, retrieving the good cloth, washing their faces. They scramble about with eager little feet, bumping into each other, arguing playfully, making the house feel alive again. You spread out the clean cloth on the table and begin arranging the festival offerings. Bread shaped with careful cuts, dried fruits saved for special days, a small pinch of honey from your precious stores. You place the herb bowl at the center. Everything looks modest, but sincerity matters more than abundance. A quirky historical tidbit floats to mind. In some alpine villages, women brought decorated wooden spoons to festivals, believing the patterns carved on them would influence the year's harvest. The more intricate the carving, the better the luck. You glance at your own plain spoon and shrug. Maybe luck doesn't need carving today. You gather the children and walk toward the village square. The path is lined with neighbours setting out their own offerings or carrying baskets brimming with bread, flowers, and sometimes questionable preserved treats. The air buzzes with anticipation. Even the goats seem unusually well behaved, which is frankly suspicious. You reach the square, where women have already begun tying ribbons around the central tree, bright colours swaying in the breeze like joyful flags. You tie yours among them, choosing a branch just low enough for your youngest to help. Their small fingers work clumsily but proudly. You guide them, keeping your smile warm. Historians still argue whether festivals served more as religious obligations or social glue. Watching your community now, women laughing, children weaving between adults, elders giving quiet instructions, you know the answer is both. Festivals keep spirits strong and keep people connected, especially when so many households live with absence tucked into their daily routines. As the ceremony begins, you stand with your neighbours. A woman recites a blessing for health and harvest. You join the chorus, repeating familiar words that have been spoken for generations. The children mimic the gestures, some accurately, some with enthusiastic chaos. The smell of incense and herbs wafts through the air, mingling with smoke from cooking fires. For a moment you feel a pang. He should be here. His hand should be in yours. His voice should join the prayer. The ache blooms again, gentle but persistent. You breathe through it, letting the crowd's warmth cushion the feeling. After the blessing, you walk with Maren and her children to the smaller gathering by the riverbank, where families place their offerings in shallow baskets and let the water carry their hopes downstream. You guide your youngest hand as they lower the little basket onto the water's surface. It wobbles, catches the current, then floats gracefully away. Will it reach farther? Your child asks. You swallow softly. Maybe, you say. The river carries messages far. It's not true in a literal sense, but truth and comfort aren't always the same thing. A group of women begin singing an old festival song. You join in, your voice blending with theirs. The melody is simple, repetitive, something even the smallest children can follow. It weaves through the air like thread connecting each heart in the village. As the festivities continue, you help distribute bread, share stories, accept small gifts, and laugh at the toddlers chasing chickens in circles. The noise is a balm, a reminder that solitude doesn't erase you from community. But eventually the crowd thins. Families return home with tired smiles and flour-dusted hands. You walk back with your children, their fingers sticky from honey, their laughter trailing behind you. Back inside, you set down the leftovers and remove your shawl. The house feels warm, not just from the hearth, but from the afterglow of a shared day. You sit at the table for a moment, letting the festival's echoes settle inside your bones. Historians still debate whether festivals gave women relief from loneliness or highlighted it. For you, it's both. You felt surrounded, supported, but you also felt the empty space beside you, sharper during moments of joy than in silence. Even so, the day brought colour, ritual, community, a reminder that life doesn't pause while you wait. You close your eyes and whisper a quiet thanks for the songs, the ribbons, the river, the shared bread, and the small moments that made the day feel full. You survived another cycle of tradition alone, but not unloved, not forgotten. The warmth of the festival lingers in your chest long after the music fades and the lanterns are snuffed out, but the rhythm of life never allows you to float in joy for too long. By the next morning, reality knocks, hard, sometimes literally. You're stirring a pot of porridge when a sudden crack echoes outside, sharp enough to make you freeze. The children look up, wide-eyed. You set the spoon down, wipe your hands on your apron and step toward the door with that familiar mix of caution and resignation. Because if there is one absolute truth to running a household alone, it's this: something will go wrong, unexpectedly, dramatically, and always at the worst possible moment. You push the door open and scan the yard, and there it is. A large tree branch, one you've side-eyed for months, has finally given up its will to live and collapsed onto the storage shed roof. Perfect, just perfect. You sigh so deeply it feels like you're releasing air from your soul, a mainstream historical fact. Women managing isolated households often faced crises alone: storms that damaged roofs, predators attacking livestock, surprise visits from travelers, broken tools, sudden illnesses, lost animals. Historical records from Icelandic farmsteads, American frontier diaries, and medieval European villages all describe women handling emergencies with grit, speed, and zero time for theatrics. Whether it was a flash flood or a chimney fire, they were the first and often only responders. You march toward the shed, hands on hips. The branch is massive, gnarled, heavy, and fully committed to ruining your morning. You tug it experimentally. It doesn't budge. You mutter something gentle, and by gentle you mean deeply sarcastic, and fetch your axe. But before you can start hacking, a different sound interrupts you, loud bleating. You turn. One of the goats has escaped. Of course it has, and it has climbed onto the woodpile where it stands triumphantly, like the world's most obnoxious queen surveying her kingdom. She stares at you with the exact expression of someone daring you to react. You close your eyes, count to 5, reopen them. Why, you ask the universe softly, must you test me like this? A quirky historical tidbit slides into your mind unhelpfully. In some folklore traditions, goats were considered symbols of mischief and omens of impending chaos. You look at the goat again. Yes, this tracks. You grab a handful of feed and coax the creature down, muttering promises and threats in equal measure. Surprisingly, she follows, probably because she senses your 2 seconds from emotional combustion. Once she's safely back in the pen, you reinforce the fence, again, using a combination of rope, nails, and sheer spite. Next crisis. You return to the shed and start chopping the fallen branch. The axe bites into the wood with satisfying thunks, though each swing sends a sting up your arms. Sweat gathers at your hairline. By the time you split the branch into manageable chunks, your back aches and your palms burn. But the job is done. Part 1 anyway. You climb a small stool to inspect the roof. Cracked beam? Yes. Loose tile? Yes. Your will to live? Hanging in there. You patch what you can, reinforcing the beam with a spare plank and securing the tiles with nails you pray will hold until you get help. Or until gravity decides to be kind. As you climb down, you hear another sound. Rapid footsteps. You tense, but it's just a neighbour's daughter running toward you, breathless. "Your chickens," she gasps. "They're in the lane." You stare at her, then at the sky, then at nothing in particular. Because today is apparently a themed event called Let's Break This Woman for us TM. But you thank her anyway and rush toward the lane. There they are, your chickens strutting around like tiny feathery delinquents. One is chasing a beetle, another is pecking at someone's laundry, one is simply standing in the middle of the road like it's contemplating major life decisions. You gather them one by one, muttering to yourself the entire time. You're aware that a couple of neighbours are watching from their windows, but honestly, let them. If they want a show, they can buy tickets. Historians still argue whether women in past centuries found these crises humorous or maddening. Diaries suggest a mix: frustration in the moment, laughter in the retelling. You hope future you finds this funny. Present you does not. You finally corral the last chicken back into the coop and secure the door with an extra latch. Then you enforce it with a bucket. Then you place a rock on the bucket. You're not taking chances. When you finally step back toward the house, you notice something else moved out of place. Your herb racks have toppled in the wind, spilling precious dried leaves across the ground. You crouch, scooping them up with a sinking heart. You salvage what you can, but some are too dirty. You let out a tiny groan of despair. The children peek from the doorway. "Mama, are you okay?" You look at their small faces, their concerned eyes, and despite the insanity of the last hour, you smile. A real one. "I'm okay," you say, "just busy." You usher them back inside, telling them to stay put while you finish the last bit of outside work. You lift the herb racks, brush them off, and reset them more securely. As you do, a final breeze rustles through the yard, and for a moment, everything falls quiet again. The crises fade, your breath steadies, your hands still shake, but only a little. You straighten up, surveying the yard. Goats confined, chickens returned, shed patched, herbs salvaged. It's imperfect, but functional. You've tamed the chaos, at least for today. You walk back inside, closing the door with a soft click. Unexpected crises always come. You don't choose them, you don't predict them, but you handle them every time with a mix of stubbornness, competence, and that strange, ancient strength carried by women who've done this for centuries. You set the axe down, wash your hands, and stir the now lukewarm porridge. Life continues because of you. Once the chaos subsides and the world stops throwing tree branches, goats, and delinquent chickens at your face, the day shifts into a quieter rhythm. This is the part of household life that doesn't make noise, doesn't demand emergency repairs, and doesn't leave bruises on your shins, but still carries enormous weight, teaching your children the skills they'll need to survive a life that isn't gentle. You gather them inside where the light spills through the window in soft, warm stripes. The porridge is finally reheated properly, and the children eat with that focused intensity only kids can muster. Spoons scraping the bowl, cheeks puffed out, tiny legs swinging under their chairs. You watch them with a tender eye, knowing they're growing faster than you'd like. Once they're fed, once the dishes are stacked, and once your own pulse has settled from the morning's battles, you call them over. "Time for lessons," you say gently. They groan in perfect harmony. A mainstream historical fact. Across cultures, from medieval Europe to the indigenous Americas to rural East Asia, women were often the first teachers, not just in reading or numbers, but in every practical skill imaginable: tending crops, mending clothes, preparing food, recognizing weather patterns, navigating social norms, understanding household economics. With men away for long periods, these lessons became even more crucial. Knowledge meant survival. You start with something simple today: sorting dried beans. Not glamorous, not exciting, but essential. You lift 2 bowls, one full of mixed beans, one empty, and place them on the floor between the children. "Sort these," you say, "by size and colour." They look at you like you've assigned them manual labour at a mountain mine. "It's important," you add. "Why?" the eldest asks. You tap your temple. "Because what we sort now is what we cook later, and what we cook later depends on how well we prepare now." They exchange looks. Then, finally, they begin. You watch their little hands move, clumsy but determined. Beans clatter against the bowl with each decision. This one round, this one long, this one cracked, this one perfect. You give small corrections, praise, encouragement, a quirky historical tidbit. In some Andean communities, children learned agricultural tasks by playing pretend harvest games, sorting seeds and imitating their mothers. The games weren't games at all, they were disguised training. You smile, realizing you're doing the same thing. Next, you take them outside for tool lessons, gentle, safe, supervised. You hand the eldest a small wooden mallet for tapping loose pegs into place. You show the youngest how to carry sticks without dropping them. One day they'll manage larger tasks, but today is practice. You crouch beside them, patient and warm. Hold it like this, you say, guiding hands. Tap lightly. Let the tool do the work. They nod with wide eyes, absorbing every tiny motion. You feel a flicker of pride and a flicker of something heavier. Awareness. You're not just teaching tasks, you're building their independence one careful moment at a time. Then come the softer lessons, reading the sky. You stand in the yard with both children pointing toward the horizon. See that, you say, indicating a long, low cloud drifting like a grey scarf. That means wind is coming later, and wind means we bring the Urbrax inside. What else do we check, they think? Then the eldest answers, the shutters? You smile. Exactly. Historians still argue whether women taught children more out of necessity or cultural expectation. You know the truth. It's both. Necessity shapes you, but love shapes how you teach. You lead them to the chickens next. Today, they learn egg collecting. The youngest carries a small basket, clutching the handle like it's a sacred artifact. The eldest lifts the coop door carefully, peering inside with exaggerated caution. They gather the eggs one by one, gently, and place them into the basket. Their faces glow with pride. You praise them sincerely. Once inside again, you move to one of your favourite lessons, mending. You take out fabric scraps, needle and thread. You let them choose colours. Today isn't about perfection. It's about confidence. You thread their needles for them, guide their hands, show them how to stitch without tangling the thread into a chaotic bird's nest. Their first attempts are messy, loops uneven, stitches crooked. You love them anyway. Good, you say softly. Every stitch teaches your fingers something. And it's true. You learned the same way, hands guided by women who loved you with fierce, steady patience. Later, while the children play outside with sticks and imagination, you reflect on how much of your life is spent passing things on. Little things, big things, invisible things, everything you know, everything women before you knew, moves from you into them in these quiet pockets of the day. You call them back in for the final lesson, a tiny survival trick. You show them how to test rope strength by pulling steadily from the center rather than the ends. Such a small thing, such a tiny lesson, but one that could keep them safe someday. They listen. They try it. They remember. In the soft glow of the afternoon, the house feels alive with learning, growth, and legacy. You realize suddenly, and powerfully, that you are their entire world right now. Not just the person who cooks, or cleans, or repairs, or keeps wolves and officials away. You are the architect of their knowledge, their memories, their sense of what a capable person looks like. Historians still argue which skills mattered most for children in your position, practical ones or emotional ones. But sitting there, watching them knot rope and giggle when it tangles, you know the truth. Both keep you alive, both keep you human. You end the day with a simple phrase, something your mother said to you, something you now pass forward like a quiet inheritance. Do what you can with steady hands, and your children, finally tired, nod in understanding. You taught them well today, and tomorrow you'll teach them more. The afternoon light slants across the yard in soft amber ribbons, wrapping everything in that warm, almost evening glow. It's the hour between exhaustion and relief, between effort and rest, the hour when you finally allow yourself to think about something you've kept tucked behind all your responsibilities, his return. You stand at the doorway for a long moment, wiping your hands on your apron without realizing it, eyes drifting toward the distant road. The same road he walked down months ago, the same road you imagine him on now, inching closer day by day, step by step. Preparing for his return is not one task. It's 100 tiny ones woven together, emotional, practical, hopeful, anxious. And like every part of your life, it falls to you alone. You start indoors, almost automatically, moving through the house with gentle purpose. Not because you need things perfect for him, he doesn't care about perfection, but because preparing gives your restless heart something to do. The first thing you do is the bedding. You shake out the blankets, turning them inside out to release dust motes that swirl like tiny stars in the sunbeam. You smooth the sheets, feeling the cool linen under your palms. The bed has felt cavernous these past months, half empty in a way that makes sleep feel thinner, lighter, too easy to disturb. You catch your fingers tracing the space where he usually sleeps. You tug your hand away gently. A mainstream historical fact. Countless wives, from seafarers' families in Scandinavia, to merchants' households in India, to soldiers' homes across Europe, prepared meticulously for their husbands' seasonal or long-distance returns. They repaired clothes, aired bedding, readied special meals, and tried to anticipate everything that might ease the transition. Homecoming wasn't just a reunion. It was a ritual of reintegration. You step to the hearth next, checking your supply of firewood. Enough for tonight. Enough for tomorrow. Maybe not enough for a week. You make a mental note to cut more tomorrow. The good pieces, the ones that catch quickly and burn steadily. He always prefers those. Then there's the pantry. You open the door, scan the shelves, and feel a flicker of pride. The stores are holding. You've rationed well. You set aside a few of the better dried apples, the crunchier loaves, the small pot of jam you've been saving for a special occasion. This counts. You also notice one jar of pickled vegetables you nearly forgot about. You smile. He'll love that. A quirky historical tidbit surfaces. In some 18th century fishing villages, women saved a single ribbon, a spice, or a tiny luxury item for their husband's return. A deliberate gesture symbolizing both affection and survival. You reach into a drawer and pull out a scrap of cloth you've been mending slowly over weeks. A handkerchief, maybe. A small thing. But it's something made while waiting, stitch by stitch in the quiet hours. You continue. You tend to the tools outside, storing them neatly so the yard doesn't look like a battlefield of chores. You check the shed roof one more time, because even though you know it's secure, you can't help yourself. You refill the water trough so the animals won't create chaos on the day he arrives. You tighten the gate latch again. You sweep the front step. It's not about impressing him. It's about welcoming him. Historians still argue whether women felt joy, stress, or fear around their husbands' returns. Some diaries reveal excitement. Others reveal tension. The fear that months apart had changed something subtle, or that the rhythm of shared life would be difficult to rediscover. You know, a little of both. You slip back inside and sit at the table rubbing your aching hands, and in the silence the fear surfaces. What if he's changed? What if you have? What if the children cling to him awkwardly, unsure after so long? What if the household rhythm you've built alone clashes with his? You press your palms flat on the table and breathe. This is normal, you remind yourself. You've done this before. You'll do it again. The children wander into the room, sensing your mood the way children instinctively do. Your eldest sits across from you. Is he coming home soon? They ask. You smile softly. Soon, you whisper. We're getting ready. Their eyes brighten. They begin chatting about what they'll show him. The new rope trick, the patch of vegetables they helped grow, the chicken that dislikes everyone but them. Their excitement fills the room like sunlight spilling into dark corners. You watch them, and your heart softens. This part right here, is what anchors you. Hope is not a luxury, it's part of the work. Preparing isn't just cleaning and organizing, it's making emotional space for him to return. It's opening doors inside yourself you kept closed because they made missing him too painful. You rise again and check the windows one more time, not because you must, but because anticipation has a way of turning you into a restless ghost of yourself. The sky's shifting toward evening now, painted in gold and lavender. The road is quiet. But one day soon, even if not today, you'll look up and see a familiar shape walking toward the house. You imagine that moment, his silhouette appearing between the trees, his tired smile when he sees you, the way the children will run, the way your breath will catch. For now, though, the preparation is enough. It steadies you. It fills your hours with purpose rather than ache. You sit by the window, letting the last light wash over your face. You're not just preparing the house, you're preparing your heart. And in that quiet, hopeful space, you whisper the smallest of promises. When he returns, we'll make our rhythm again. Not the old one, a new one. Together. Dusk settles slowly over the house, soft, golden, unhurried, like a final exhale from the day. You feel it in the way the shadows lengthen gently rather than sharply, in the way the sounds of the village grow distant, absorbed by the thickening evening air and in the way your own breath deepens as though the world is giving you permission to finally pause. You step outside for one last look across the property, lantern in hand, its warm glow forming a little halo around you. The fence stands steady. The animals have quieted. The tools are stacked. The children's laughter echoes faintly from inside as they settle into their nightly chatter before sleep. Everything is, miraculously, calm. And so you let yourself wander toward your favourite spot, the large flat stone near the orchard where you sometimes sit to watch the light fade. You lower yourself onto it, legs tucked close, shawl wrapped around your shoulders. For a moment you close your eyes, feeling the evening breeze brush across your cheeks like a cool hand. A mainstream historical fact. Women left to run households alone often ended their days in near silence, using sunset as the only time where no task demanded immediate attention. In journals from early colonial America, Norse farmsteads and Edo period villages, women described dusk as their moment of reflection, where they processed the weight of the day and gathered strength for the next. You sit in that inheritance now, letting the quiet seep into your bones. The lantern flickers gently at your side and above you. The sky unfurls into its night blue cloak. One star appears, then another, then a dozen more. The children's voices soften until only distant murmurs remain. You lean back on your hands, grounding yourself in the earth. And that's when the memories tap softly at your door. Memories of him leaving, yes, but also memories of his laughter around the hearth, of shared glances over morning tasks, of a time when the workload was divided and the evenings were shared instead of solitary. You let those memories come, not as sharp aches, but as warm embers. A quirky historical tidbit slips into your thoughts. Some ancient cultures believed twilight was a sacred hour when ancestors walked invisibly beside the living. You smile faintly, imagining generations of women sitting exactly like this. Tired but proud, lonely but resilient, carrying entire households on their shoulders while the world folded quietly into night. Historians still argue whether these solitary dusk hours strengthened women or simply reminded them of their burdens. You think the truth is that it did both. Because sitting here, breathing deeply, you feel the weight of everything you've done today, every crisis handled, every chore completed, every child taught, every emotion managed, and yet you also feel the quiet triumph of having made it through. You pick up a small pebble and roll it between your fingers, grounding, soothing. A reminder that you don't have to be extraordinary every moment of every day. You only have to continue, and you have. Behind you, the children shift in their blankets. You rise slowly and walk back inside, lantern guiding your steps. You tuck them in one by one, soft kisses on foreheads, gentle pats on blankets, whispered wishes for sweet dreams. They relax beneath your touch because you are their certainty, their warmth, their anchor in a world that shifts constantly. Then you move to your own bed. You sit on the edge for a moment, looking at the space beside you, that familiar half-empty place, and instead of letting loneliness seep in, you run your palm across the sheet and whisper something small, private, steady. Soon, you lie down, let the quiet wrap around you, and breathe deeply. Outside, the wind sighs through the trees. The shutters rattle softly. The lantern flame dances low. Another day done. And somehow, against all odds, through storms and chores and expectations and exhaustion, you carried it with grace, because you always do. The room softens around you as the last threads of daylight disappear, leaving only the warm, pulsing glow of the embers in the hearth. The air feels thicker now, calmer, like it has finally decided to rest beside you, instead of pressing against your shoulders. You breathe in slowly, letting the breath stretch long and quiet through your chest, easing every muscle that worked so hard today. The sounds outside grow muted, crickets humming, leaves brushing gently against one another, the world shifting into its nighttime hush. You let your thoughts drift the same way the smoke drifts upward from the hearth, lazily, unhurriedly, without direction. The weight of the day loosens piece by piece like knots softening under warm water. You made it through the morning's chaos, the afternoon's demands, the evening's doubts. You cared, you fixed, you taught, you protected. And now the night wraps around everything with that slow, forgiving stillness that invites you to simply be. Your eyelids grow heavier with each breath, the quiet deepens, the soft rustling of blankets, the steady rhythm of your own inhaling and exhaling, the gentle pulse of warmth against your skin, all of it begins to sway together in a slow lullaby. The room feels safe, the world feels distant, and you feel held by something tender and steady and old. Let the day drift away now, sinking into softness. Let your thoughts scatter like feathers into the dark. Let yourself rest in the quiet comfort you've created with your own hands, your own strength. There is nothing left to do tonight. Just breathe, just rest, just sleep.